It's a pleasure to have you here with us. My name is Morgan Farrar. I use she, her pronouns. I am an assistant director of undergraduate admissions here at WashU. And first and foremost, congratulations. We are so excited to have you all here, to welcome you to the class this year, and hope that tonight's session will give you some information that'll help yield beneficial results or decision making on your end. Tonight we are here with Carolyn Herman, who will be speaking about our pre-health office services and process, what that looks like. So assuming that you all here are interested in the pre-health programs and tracks or have applied under those, this will be helpful information for you, whether you are officially coming to WashU, again, deciding what's going to be the best fit for you. We do have an open Q&A feature, which we will be utilizing for the webinar this evening. So please feel free, as Carolyn is presenting, to utilize that Q&A, pop in those questions. I will be behind the scenes answering some of those, but then we will have dedicated Q&A time to answer those questions live. So please submit them as the presentation is going, so we can jump right in and use the rest of our remaining time for your questions, and so you can get things answered that you're curious about. So that is all I have to say. Carolyn, I will turn things over to you to share with our admitted students.
Well, thank you so much. So Carolyn Herman, I'm an associate dean in the College of Arts and Sciences, and I'm going to hopefully, yes, get my screen sharing done here. Okay. So I want to just talk a little bit about how pre-health works at WashU, and hopefully get a lot of your questions answered, and ones that I don't cover, I definitely welcome us engaging with those kind of after I've run through a few quick slides here. And one thing I spend a fair amount of time, my team and I, with when, entering students actually come to campus in the fall, in the first year. We meet with students, we have, advising sessions, we have drop-in advising, and we end up doing a fair amount of sort of dispelling some myths or helping students recalibrate what ends up, at least at WashU, being kind of misinformation. So I thought maybe that would actually be a good way to, to organize this session. Okay, there. So one common belief that students enter with is that if they're going to be pre-med, and I will also say we support all health professions. So we've got a fairly large cohort of pre-dental students. We have students who come here with the intention, or who, discover the idea of being in the 3-2 program for occupational therapy. We have students who come in planning to become physical therapists, and we support all of those pre-health professions and are delighted to have all of, the whole range of healthcare options. But the largest group certainly is students who plan to go on to medical school. So a lot of my remarks will be focused on that. So a lot of students think that if they're going to medical school, they have to major in biology. And at least at Washington University, you can major in anything you want. This is from a recent year. This isn't last year. I think it's the year before last, but I went through by hand and counted. 38% of our successful first-time applicants did not major in biology, and a full quarter of them didn't major in science at all, or natural science at all. So we have all kinds of majors that, some of them might be not at all surprising, but some of them, we have a huge anthropology department here, and there's a pretty large medical anthropology focus. So we have a lot of students who are studying anthropology who go on to medical school. I have more and more students who are studying economics because they're very interested in thinking about how we're going to pay for healthcare in the future, the economics of healthcare delivery, and how we're going to make that affordable for patients, maximize patient outcomes without devoting all of our GDP to just to healthcare. Philosophy, neuroscience, psychology is an interdisciplinary major here that is very, very popular. A lot of students pursue that, and a fair number of them who do go on to medical school. Psychology is a very large major here, and psychological and brain sciences, and especially the cognitive neuroscience track in that, are very popular pre-med endeavors. And I have a lot of students who are majoring in languages who, want to be really fluent in a language and believe that where they will either train in medical school or will choose to practice, that being able to, function at a very high level in another language is going to help them and their patients. So a second belief that I spend a lot of time reassuring students is not true is a lot of people worry that they need to have perfect grades. And some people, have exposure to maybe other schools or have heard that, if your grades aren't good enough, your institution won't support you. They won't let you be part of their advising program or do, whatever they do for their students. You won't qualify. That is simply not true here. We support and advise all students, and I do mean all. We have no minimum requirements. We believe that everyone that we admit has the capacity to develop into an excellent applicant for whatever health profession they have in mind. And so, the timeline might vary. If you get off to a very slow start in some of your early science classes, maybe you'll need to take an extra year before you apply to kind of, improve your transcript. But we will help you strategize about how to get where you want to go. And we really do believe if you really want this, it is not a question of if, but when. Your timeline can change. There is no academic misstep that you can make that changes the final destination. I also want to say that this is not last year, but 2 years ago, the average GPA of the students we advised who were admitted to medical school was 3.4. So we have students with, not wildly, unimaginable credentials who are being very successful in application. The third idea that I spend a lot of time kind of evangelizing about is a lot of people feel like they just have to get everything done so that they can go straight through. They have to apply the summer after their junior year so that right after graduation, they have a month to travel with their friends, and then they will immediately start medical school. And if they don't do that, it's going to be a problem. And maybe it will even be a problem to access, pre-medical advising resources. That is also not at all true here. Many of my students are taking at least one gap year. 2 is actually becoming more common. There's just a lot of things to do to get ready, and it's much better to do them at a pace that you're comfortable with and take all the time you need to get really ready and do everything with excellence, and then go when you actually feel ready, when you feel like you've acquired the complete portfolio that you want to bring to an outstanding application. We work with many, many alumni, and we work with alumni all over the country. We were doing that before the pandemic. So we've just gotten better at the virtual piece with the practice that we've all gotten, on Zoom and et cetera. But all of our resources for supporting applicants, mock interviews, meeting with the Writing Center for personal statements, meeting with advisors for individual conversations, all of those things are available virtually. They are, most of them are also available in person as well. So that is, up to the students. So some students choose to stay here in town. Maybe they work as a clinical research coordinator while they're applying, and, they pop over on their lunch break and talk to me in person, and that's great. Other students, will make an appointment and plan to, come to that appointment over Zoom, and that's great too. I welcome either one. So what what are the resources that we have that, our pre-health students really appreciate? I think there are a couple of categories there that we can talk about. We have a lot of research opportunities here, and that includes even clinical research over at the med school. We do have a really great advising team that has knowledgeable, and I really want to emphasize supportive there. We really want to help each student get to their goal, and we're not discouraging anybody from pursuing their goals. And then we have a very, very structured and effective pre-application support process. So let's first talk about clinical experience and research opportunities. So I went through and counted again by hand in a recent year. I don't do this every year because it's a little tedious, but it doesn't vary that much from one year to year, from year to year. And that year, 84% of my admitted applicants had done undergraduate research at Washington University. I love that number because it's very clear that for students who are interested, it's not only a special few who get to have this opportunity. Basically, everybody who wants to do research here can. I also love that it's not 100%. 16% of those students did not elect to do research as an undergraduate here. And if they chose instead to lean into some community engagement, some, possibly even clinically related community service that tied to their long-term goals in medicine, I love that, and we will support that. So we're not making anybody do research, but it is abundantly available for students who want to pursue it. And that does include, I have students who join clinical research teams over at the med school all the time, but a lot of students are also doing basic science research. And that might be even in animal models where they, learn to do rat surgeries or whatever it might be. So there are just an amazing array of opportunities and plenty for everybody. We also have specific courses that are set up to give you clinical experience. That picture there on my screen is a picture from MedPrep 2. So MedPrep 1 is a classroom experience where you learn about how to be a good citizen when you are engaged over at our adult emergency room in our teaching hospital, Barnes. And in MedPrep 2, you actually wear one of the red shirts like the young man in the photo there, and you're going to shadow a physician in the emergency room and sort of get to see what they do and the full range of experiences. You'll see some, probably in the times that you're over there, you'll see some like very big trauma cases because it is, an advanced level whatever trauma center. But you'll also see that, it's a safety net hospital, and the emergency room is also serving as an urgent care for people that don't have insurance and don't have good healthcare access. So that's a terrific experience that my students really, really value. We also have something called the Pediatric Emergency Medicine Research Associates Program. And in that, students go to the children's emergency room at our teaching hospital, that's our children's hospital, and actually help recruit children and their families into ongoing research protocols in the emergency room. Now, the ones that students are involved in recruiting for are fairly low risk. They're certainly trained to get a good informed consent, but we don't ask them to do informed consent for anything that where what you're consenting to is in any way tricky. But are you willing to participate in a study that randomizes what kind of pain management you get while we, set a bone that's broken or something like that? And so students get a lot of experience talking with patients and their families, and they also get to see how clinical research in academic medicine works. So it still amazes me after all these years that as an undergraduate at Washington University, you can make an actual contribution to new knowledge in medicine. That's not true everywhere. So that's a pretty neat opportunity here. We also have courses that are more sort of straight research. There's Bio 500, that is a independent research course where you're going to work in a faculty member's lab. Bio 265 is similarly where you're joining a research group as an independent person, not necessarily as part of a class, but that would be for clinical research experiences. So for research here, some students do their research for pay, others for credit, and that usually depends on, to some extent, the student's preferences, at least once they've, gotten trained. All right, so 80% of our first-time applicants are admitted to medical school, which is a terrific track record. I also want to say that means, 1 in 5 are not. And the reason that is that we aren't discouraging people from applying. We're trying to help them understand their real kind of risk position in the applicant pool. But if they know that they've got a deficiency in their application and they'd like to go ahead and apply, we do not try to prevent that. It is the candidate's decision when to apply. We help them understand how well positioned they are. Once they've made the decision to apply, we do everything we can to help them put their best foot forward. We do also have specialty advisors for all of these other health professions listed on that screen. And those individuals work closely with their applicants and, have great outcomes there too. Lots of these other professions don't have quite the same reporting system that the MD does, and our groups are smaller, so I don't necessarily have statistics for each of those. We do have a really structured process to help students prepare to apply. We've got a conference style series of workshops at the very end of the junior year called Junior Jumpstart, where we start talking about how to get ready to apply for those students who will already be applying, which is a smaller proportion every year. But for those, because more and more of my students are taking a gap year, but for those students who are getting ready to apply, we also have sessions on interviewing with the opportunity to do some workshop style practicing, polishing your personal statement. We have a public health education session, all kinds of really great sessions at that. We have a series of self-paced courses where students, get some scaffolding and coaching on all the materials that they're going to put together for a complete application and some suggestions for how to think about those. But we don't just send you off to a Canvas course and, have you do it on your own. Those self-paced courses are interwoven with regular advising appointments with your pre-health advisor to track your progress and give you feedback. The Writing Center does personal statement workshops, and they're really, really experienced people over there who are great at helping students find their voice and figure out, what they want to say. For many students, writing about themselves and why medicine is a very daunting task, especially when they've been practicing a more academic style of writing for several years. So we've got a really strong set of coaches for that. You will, right before you apply, a couple of months before you apply, you will have a strategy meeting with your pre-health advisor where you have at least solid drafts of all the materials that you will eventually submit in your application. And you and your advisor can talk about, are they coming together into a unified message? Does every piece of your application synergistically reinforcing the other pieces? Or is there some tweaking that we should consider to make your application even stronger? And then we also have mock interviewing is sponsored by our Career Center. And some of the people who do mock interviews for medical school are actually retired physicians who have, at various points in their career interviewed for WashU Med and, been part of the admissions process at our own School of Medicine. So we've got a really, really strong suite of resources to help students get ready to apply. All right, I am ready to take questions, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if I can pull up the Q&A here. Is engineering uncommon for pre-med students? I wouldn't say it's uncommon. We definitely have more, students in arts and sciences applying to medical school than engineering, but arts and sciences is also a much larger school. Engineering has fewer students. So they do have also, pre-health advisors there. They've got a great suite of resources that are engineering specific. And I would not discourage somebody from, considering engineering if they are also pre-med. Is it common to study abroad with a PNP major on the pre-med track for a semester, even with the heavy course load and academic rigor that it comes with? Common is an interesting word. I don't know. It's definitely possible, and I'm not sure how common it is. I certainly have had PNP students who go on not a PNP specific study abroad program, but we have a public policy and kind of health policy study abroad program in Copenhagen through the Danish Institute for Study Abroad. You get to do a lot of really nice touring of different, and learning about different healthcare systems in different parts of Europe. And, they don't all have exactly the same healthcare delivery as like the national healthcare system that we may think of that the Scandinavian countries have. So, I certainly have students who go and do that, who are PNP, who get everything done on time and are just fine. I do think that PNP is one of the denser majors. And so I wouldn't be surprised to learn that their students would sometimes choose summer study abroad programs just so that they've got a little more time to fit everything in. What is the reason students are taking a gap year? Is that because they didn't get into the school of their choice or they just want to take a break? So they are not taking a gap year because they didn't get in. They are taking a gap year because they didn't yet apply. So if you're going to go straight through, you have to apply in the very beginning of June after your junior year. That means by the end of May of your junior year. And so you don't get to use any of the summer after your junior year, only the summer after your first year and the summer after your sophomore year. And then those 3 academic years, first year, sophomore, junior year. So in that short, what ends up feeling like a short span of time for all the things they have to get done, you have to take a bunch of coursework. You have to have time while you're taking courses. Most students are not going to take biochemistry until fall of their junior year. Biochemistry is on the MCAT. So the earliest most students can take the MCAT is January of their junior year. And then, so you've got all this stuff going on in the fall for your MCAT. You have to have a bunch of clinical experience. You have to have a bunch of community service. You have to develop relationships with at least 3 faculty. Lots of students want to have a strong research showing as well. There's just a lot to fit in. And a lot of students by even January of their junior year are looking around and saying, if I had another year to do all of this, I would be so much better prepared. I would just have a way better application. So they are taking a gap year so that they have a better portfolio when they apply, not because they applied unsuccessfully. Are there clinical research opportunities for first year pre-med students? I would say by and large, no. I don't think very many first years end up getting involved in clinical research. Possibly if they have already done some at home, maybe, but also most first years just shouldn't do research. They should get settled in on the Danforth campus. They have a lot of, lab classes. They literally don't have that many breaks during the day in that very first year when they can even travel over to the med school. So mostly students, if they're going to do research, it works better for it to be on the Danforth campus first year. But after that, lots and lots of students trekking over to the med school, no doubt about it. What year can students enroll in PEMRAP starting second year? So first year students are excluded from PEMRAP, but sophomores and on up. And are there any prerequisites? There are not. They're, I think they like them to have med prep, and they have to do, HIPAA and background check and, all that stuff that anybody else has to do to be in the hospital, but that's part of the course. How do we get in contact with a pre-health advisor? Is one assigned to us? When will that happen, and how will we know? So you, so we have a ton of drop-in advising that we encourage first-year students to come to if they have any pre-health questions whatsoever. But we don't feel like it's necessarily the best thing to assign a specific pre-health advisor before students have even gotten to know their main academic advisor. So we want students to settle in here a little bit, start feeling at home at Washington University. Definitely come and ask the experts any questions they have. I also have a pre-health questions calendar. So if you don't want to come to drop-in advising, you can make an individual appointment on my calendar, and my other colleagues have that as well. So there's lots of opportunity to talk with people, get questions answered, but we sort of want to give you a chance to, develop your own ideas and to get to know your main four-year advisor. At the end of your, whenever you're interested, but certainly we advertise it at the end of the first year, but students could do it earlier. We have a Canvas course called A Reflective Guide for Pre-Health Students that gives them some self-reflection assignments. And after they complete those self-reflection assignments, then we actually assign an individual pre-health advisor. So that might start, the beginning of summer of your, right after your first year. You might, knock out that Canvas course early in the summer. It's not a huge commitment. Most students are spending about 5 hours in it, and then start working with your pre-health advisor that summer. And we would welcome that. Not everybody wants to get started that fast. That's also fine. This is really, that's one of the reasons we set it up where students kind of signal when they're ready for an advisor by, doing a little bit of homework for us. How many WashU undergrads matriculate into the WashU Med School? We always have between 10 and 20% of the class across the park. So we send more students to Washington University School of Medicine than to any other single medical school. And we always have the largest representation of any single undergraduate program in any WashU Med class. That said, not everybody is pre-med, undergrad, WashU is going to go to WashU Med, because we send between 250 and 300 students to medical school every year, and there's only 125 seats at our School of Medicine. The good news is, by the time, even if they think when they're first year students, I really want to go to Washington University School of Medicine. That's why I'm going to WashU. I really want to go to Washington University School of Medicine. And I think I'll have a little bit of an advantage if I go to WashU undergrad, which is true to some extent. By the time they are actually applying, some students have changed their minds. They've gotten other interests. They've gotten really interested in rural medicine. WashU is an okay place to do rural medicine. It's not necessarily the very best place in the country with the broadest range of clinics that will give you rural medicine practice. So, depending on what your interests are, there are a range of schools that students decide are their first choice by the time they're actually applying. What percentage of the graduating class applies to med school? Well, it's between 250 and 300 every year. And I don't know, do we have like 1,500 students, whatever that is? Does majoring in biology overlap a lot with the pre-med requirements? Yes, it does. And so I think that's where the idea comes from, that you have to major in biology, but you don't have to do a full bio major by any stretch to do all the pre-med requirements. And so it is perfectly possible to choose other majors. There's plenty of time alongside any major to also take all the pre-med requirements. Assuming that I am a freshman entering WashU in the fall, what is the first step I should take in my pre-med journey? Any specific resources to seek or certain people to talk to? That is a lovely question. I love that question. I think you can never have too much clinical experience. So, informational interviewing or shadowing or volunteering in a clinical setting. And that doesn't have to be a hospital, it could be a nursing home or working with a potential patient population. If your local Y has a 1 week camp for, diabetic adolescents who are learning to manage their own insulin and blood sugar, and you can volunteer at that, lovely. So any experience with patients or in clinical settings is terrific. Also, you can never have too much community service. So even if you elect to do something like, you get really involved with Habitat for Humanity, it doesn't have to have anything to do with medicine. They want to know that you have a genuine interest in improving the welfare of others, and you can demonstrate that in lots of settings. Do pre-med advisors know the best course rigor for each student to make them most competitive when applying to medical schools? Well, pre-med advisors are not omniscient. So I would say that pre-med advisors and students together discover what the best academic path is going to be for each individual student based on their interests, their prior experiences, likes and dislikes, and their outcomes in early courses. And so we, take all of that information into account when we're, working with students on picking an optimal schedule and an optimal timeline for completing all their requirements. Is there a more direct route from WashU undergrad to WashU medical school, like no MCAT required? No, we don't have any early admission or guaranteed admission programs at WashU Med. Could we skip entry-level biology courses if we have AP scores or past diagnostic exams? The answer to that is also no, but our biology here sort of starts at, so I was a biology major myself a really long time ago, and our biology course starts with the course, the content, which has changed a little bit, but the big picture is still the same. The content that was called a sophomore level cell biology course and a sophomore level genetics course when I was in college. So we kind of skip what used to be traditionally intro bio, AP bio, and go, into a lot more depth. Your AP course had some cell biology in it, had some genetics in it, but there's going to be a lot more depth in our entry level courses. How many people drop pre-med after the first year of undergraduate studies, and why? Is it because of bad grades? So that is really hard for me to track, because it's not a major, and you don't declare a major as you come in the door here anyway. So who is pre-med? Lots of students have some level of interest in it. So I work with students who are like, I know for sure I want to be a doctor. I've already, done all this shadowing and all this, I have a lot of information. I've already worked as a patient care tech or as an EMT. Great. You know a lot, and you probably aren't going to change your mind. I have other students who say, I think I might be interested in medicine. Either that or I'm going to be a lawyer. And I think you have no idea what you want to do, because those couldn't possibly be more different professions. So it's really hard to know how committed students are when they say they have some level of interest in pre-med. And I would expect the students who are considering either doctor or lawyer, that many of them might pick some third thing altogether. So I do feel like we do not weed people out here. We don't push people out. If students come in either less mature and so less able to focus on their coursework and their grades are not as strong up front, or if they come in just less prepared, like, their chemistry class was still kind of pandemic-y and they just didn't get as much out of it as they would have wanted to, then we will help them figure out what's the right next set of steps so that I can develop all the skills and tools I'll need to thrive in medical school. So we're going to just encourage students who want to persist, but we're not like trying to make anybody go to med school if they want to pick something else. There are lots of great jobs out there. Where do most WashU grads attend medical school? We send people all over the country. So, We send a lot of people to WashU Med. We send a lot of people to Case Western. That's coming to mind. This is a place I have talked to several people who are, planning to go there next year. We send a lot of people to the University of Chicago and Northwestern, UT Southwest. So, you can imagine students who already are excited to be in the Midwest sometimes like to stay in the Midwest for med school. So, also Emory, popular destination for our students. But we send students all over the East Coast as well. We do well at Columbia. We have, a ton of students at a bunch of the schools up and down the Eastern Seaboard. So all over. Can it be more difficult to stand out as a medical school applicant if I major in biology? I think it's more difficult to stand out. I also don't think it's necessary to major in biology. Like there's no major that helps. There's no major that hurts. I think what makes you stand out is not what you majored in, but the sum of your experiences and the choices that you made. Some of those might be related to your major. And if you're a biology major, maybe that's going to be some really interesting basic science biological research. If you're a Spanish major, maybe that's going to be, a project in, a Spanish speaking community here in St. Louis. So I think there are lots of different ways to augment any major so that you can stand out. Is it advisable to participate in an ampersand program? Yes. For someone on a pre-med track? Yes. Everyone should do an ampersand program. So my youngest just graduated, not this year, but last year. So 2023, May 2023 graduate. She had a terrific experience in her ampersand program, did not end up being related to anything she majored in, but she made these amazing faculty connections that she's still in touch with after graduating. So yes, I think they are just a terrific opportunity. Everybody should do an ampersand program or first year opportunity. And for clinical experience, could I work as a medical assistant if I have my certification and use those hours worked? Absolutely, yes. And that actually turns out to be a common choice. Most people don't do that in their first year, but if you're already doing it, great. But most people will tend to do that like maybe during junior year or summer after junior year into senior year, that kind of thing. What are the toughest required pre-med classes at WashU? I think that varies by student. I don't think there's one class that everybody says is toughest. I think it kind of depends on what students like, what students are interested in, and what they're best prepared for. And that's just like really individual. When are we able to do courses like Bio 500? So you can do research for credit as early as your first year. That's called Bio 200. But it's the same thing. It's just, research for credit in an individual faculty member's lab. Again, I don't necessarily recommend that people start that right out of the gate the minute they land on campus. Figure out, who you're going to be spending time with, who you're going to eat your meals with, how to do your laundry. There's a lot of things to do and figure out when you move out of your parents' home before you might need to, think about how to make a commitment to a lab. But if you already have extensive experience working in a research lab and you really know what you're getting yourself into, absolutely, it's very possible to start in your first year. Is there any way to graduate early and apply to medical school early as well, such as taking classes over breaks? Additionally, will WashU be able to help us to find internship and shadowing opportunities during vacations? So I don't know. I have a lot of students who graduate early. They don't usually graduate early and apply early because if you're like cramming your classes in to be able to graduate early, you don't have enough time to get all that service and clinical experience. So you aren't in a position to be a really strong applicant. But you can save on some tuition and, I get why that would be a priority. So, yes, I have a fair number of students who graduate a semester early and then work full-time in a clinical setting in that last semester when they're not actually taking classes. Will WashU be able to help us find internship and shadowing opportunities during vacations? So we don't have a list of places in your hometown, right? Because your hometowns are all over the world and definitely all over the country. But we definitely have strong coaching. The Career Center is excellent at helping students identify a process that's going to be productive for them, and help them put together good materials for contacting people, how to contact people professionally, how to make an ask. So yes, we can help, but help is going to be help you figure out how to do it effectively. Help is not going to be a placement service. Do medical schools want to see experience with a foreign language, or would it be better to double major, for example, business and neuroscience? Again, there's no major that helps. There's no major that hurts. I think there are medical schools value lots of different kinds of experiences. And I think that it's more about you saying why you valued that. Why did you choose that? Why was that important to you for your education in preparation for medical school? What do you have to say about why you did that? Does it look better for med school admissions to take WashU's advanced Gen Chem class rather than no? I don't think med schools care, especially your first year. Like what, who cares what classes you take when you're a first year student? They're going to look at, where did you end up, not where did you start. If they wanted you to be ready for med school when you came to college, they wouldn't make you go to college. They'd have you go straight to med school. And there are a few 6-year programs who do that, but that's not the majority of med school's approach. Does being awarded to Washington University Signature Scholar programs give you a slight advantage for med school, Irvin, and all those? I mean, I think that, the Signature Scholar programs are obviously enrolling a particularly talented group of students. And so that correlates with a great deal of success in everything those students do next. So yeah, I think the programs are a great community, and you get lots of connections with former scholars. And so there's probably lots of sort of ancillary benefits, but I don't think medical schools necessarily look at, oh, you were a Danforth scholar, we want to, make sure we interview you. I think it's just that you have a network of experiences, some of which you were plugged into because you were a Danforth scholar. What makes a pre-med experience at WashU unique from other highly prestigious schools? I only work here, so I really can't compare to other schools. I don't know enough about what other schools do to really give a meaningful answer to that. I'm really proud of what we do here. I know that we support every student and that our students are incredibly successful. Can every program say that? I really don't know. I haven't studied that. How do the pre-health advisors and students differentiate their experiences on their application from one another? I think, again, that's how you talk about it. It's the choices that you made because they were authentically meaningful to you. So I do, I have students say all the time to me, like, oh, I feel like I'm just doing the things that all the other pre-meds do, and I don't want to be a cliche. And my response to that is, do all parents say that they love their children? And of course, they agree with me that pretty much all parents do love their children. And I said, does that make it a cliche, or does that make it a universal human experience? So there are lots of aspects of preparing for medicine that are going to be universal experiences that are sort of necessary in order to be well prepared. That doesn't make it a cliche that you had the necessary universal experiences. Those will be complemented by individualized choices that you made that are going to definitely differentiate you from other applicants. And even if you're doing the exact same thing as your suite mate, how you talk about it will be different because you are two different people with different personalities, different values, different long-term goals, whatever. When can I begin getting in touch with a pre-health advisor? Well, if my email has not already been put in the chat, I would definitely invite Morgan to do that. You can certainly find it online as well. I welcome students to come to my drop-in advising. Admitted students, if they've got specific questions, are welcome to contact us and start connecting. That's just fine. Are there any courses or programs related to oncology besides one of the ampersand programs? That the cancer biology ampersand, there's also some 400 level cancer biology courses, and there's tons of oncology research. So I have tons of students who are doing research in the oncology division at the medical school. So I'd say there's sort of 3 baskets there. How easy is it to communicate with pre-med advisors? For example, is there a waiting list? Well, no. So sometimes there could be a wait in my drop-in advising. The Thursday before the drop ad deadline, I will have many students visiting drop-in advising, and so you could have to wait in line to speak to me. But generally, there's not a long wait. And, we have drop-in advising every day of the week except for Friday. So there are lots and lots of times when you don't wait at all. So hopefully that answers that. Does WashU tailor its classes to help with the MCAT or provide resources so its students can succeed with the MCAT? Yes, we've got an in-house MCAT course, and we're actually working on developing some additional materials as well. So I think we've got a pretty robust, preparation for the MCAT. Our courses certainly cover all of the, all the material you're going to need in chemistry and biology, no doubt about that. What's your favorite pre-health related course? Oh, there are so many. We have so many great courses. We have all these medical humanities courses. We have all these medical anthropology courses. We've got lots of, courses in the biology department that are, more human physiology and, genetics and human genetics and even, mind, brain behavior focused. So gosh, I don't know if I can pick a favorite. Do you have any personal suggestions for WashU clubs that's great for the pre-med track? Something that you will love and that you will, that you like the vibe of the people there. Like join clubs to make friends as well as to, be involved in your community. There are lots and lots of clubs that do service in the community. I think that's efficient for pre-meds, but there are so many choices there. So find your people and you start by trying a number of different clubs. And then when you find your people, stick with that. Is it beneficial to study abroad for pre-med majors, or would it be better to stay in the States and find internship and shadowing opportunities? I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. I think it gets harder to go abroad. The more, kind of complicated your life gets. So undergraduate is a time when you can carve out the time to spend a semester abroad. So I would never speak against doing that. But not every pre-med goes abroad, and that's okay too. When do we join clubs? Is there a club fair? There absolutely is a club fair about maybe the second week of school. And there's, a big, hundreds of tables, and depending on the weather, it could be outside or inside in the rec center. And you can walk around to tables and talk to the, upper level students who are leaders in the organization about the organizations and hear a little bit about what they do, and then pick from that maybe 4 to 6 to like visit a group, a large group, a general body meeting, and figure out which ones you want to engage with more in depth. Can you say more about non-pre-med science major tracks that commonly participate in research? So yeah, I think, for my students that are interested either in MD, PhD, or a straight PhD, there are abundant basic science research opportunities, both on the Danforth campus and over at the School of Medicine. And so, students who are chemistry or biology or biochemistry majors, just have lots and lots of opportunity. Is calculus required for every STEM major like psych? No. So calculus is not really required. Calc 1 is the most that is required for med school. Calc 2 is helpful for our physics, but you could even take it pass fail. If you don't love calculus and you're not really a math person, there are lots of things you can major in that will not be a problem for that in pre-med. Would getting research to med school be highly unlikely for a freshman? I don't know if I'd say highly unlikely. I think it depends on whether you have prior experience in a research lab. I think if you're I just wouldn't recommend it if you don't have prior experience in a research lab, at least until you're really done with one semester, because you're not going to know like what the rhythm of your semester is going to be like. You don't want to make a commitment to a lab and then midway through the semester start having to say like, I can't actually come today because I really have to do, a lot of homework for this class, or I really have to study for this test. Like you don't, you want to know what the cadence of your schedule is going to be so that when you make a commitment, you're confident you can keep it. Are most classes science related hands-on, or are they mostly big lecture halls? So I would say the pre-req classes, Gen Chem, organic, biology, they have an associated lab that's in a small group, but that lab meets once a week and does a hands-on experiment. Then the majority of the content is going to be, somebody in a lecture hall. At what point do students need to be fully committed to being pre-med in order to have enough time to complete all the components of their med school applications? There is no deadline. People go, I every year have like generally at least one person who graduates from Washington University, joins the Peace Corps, and 3 years later comes back and says, I think I really want to go to med school now. Like that's what I learned in the Peace Corps. And then they start getting their application materials together. And that could include, coursework, that could include clinical experience. So there is no deadline. You can prepare for medical school at any time. Does WashU help students who are conflicted about being pre-med make the decision to pursue med school or not? Yeah, I do think we have lots of resources, especially at the Career Center, for kind of discernment. I personally recommend just getting as much experience in clinical settings as you possibly can to help you figure out, like, do I see myself thriving here? Do I see this, being like the perfect future for me? Or are there other jobs where I can imagine myself being just as happy? Does WashU have a free clinic nearby? There are some student-run clinics at the med school, and I think sometimes undergraduates get involved in those, but we don't operate like a large free clinic. There are federally qualified healthcare centers, of course, in the area, and there are some clinics. There's a clinic for native speakers of Spanish who are uninsured or underinsured. And a lot of our students volunteer there. And we actually have a medical Spanish course that plugs them into volunteering there. Is being pre-med an option that you actually choose on a form when selecting a major? No. You just set up an account where you'll eventually store letters of recommendation when you are sure enough about pre-med that you think you might be collecting some letters of rec someday. Are students able to work in the HABF Health Center? A very tiny number of my students do work as medical assistants over at HABF, but there's maybe like 1 or 2 of those positions a year. So that is not something most students will do. How does one find research opportunities? Is it through cold emailing or a club? We actually have an undergraduate research office. I invite you to look at their website and especially their Getting Started tab for ideas on what they recommend for how to get started, looking for a research mentor. But, there's lots of coaching from older students. The undergraduate research office sponsors events where students can connect with faculty and researchers and, get comfortable with the idea of making some asks and, figure out how to make a good ask. So there is a lot of coaching and a lot of resources. Is it advisable if I prefer to go to grad school before getting to med school? I want to pursue an MD PhD after college, but it's kind of hard. Actually, pursuing an MD PhD from here after college is no harder than just going straight MD. And so I would say continue exploring whether you want to do basic science research. So get involved in research sometime, maybe even summer after your first year if you're already excited about it. And then, keep doing some volunteering or other exposure in clinical settings. And if you keep getting excited about both, you will get a pre-health advisor assignment that works specifically with MD PhD students And our MD PhD students are very, very successful. They might be a little bit more successful as a group than the straight MD applicants. So it is not harder to get into MD PhD programs. Could you please, at least from here, could you please elaborate on the Spanish medical course or where we can find out more about it? So it's called Medical Spanish and it's a 300 level course. So you have to be at a certain level in Spanish language, which if you have been taking AP Spanish, you might be there or close to there already. But if you haven't, then you take some lower level Spanish language acquisition courses and then you can take that course. Are there any paid research opportunities? Yes. So lots of labs. When you're first joining a lab and they are training you and they're not really getting much of a return on any investment yet, and the biggest investment is their time, not anything they're going to pay you, ask you to do it for credit. I think a little bit for you to demonstrate some skin in the game that you're willing to show up without being paid. But most labs are happy to pay students if they prefer to be paid, after they're fully trained and are, contributing members of the research team. All right. It looks like we're getting close to time, and I think I might have run out of questions.
Yeah, so I think this is a good natural stopping point. So this worked out really well. So thank you all again for wonderful questions, really wide variety of topics. I know I was able to tackle some other ones privately. As per usual, if you have questions about, I know our Center for Career Engagement came up, WashU's EMT program came up a lot. All these locations and spaces are a quick Google away, and those websites are wonderful resources to learn more. So you can see, I've just shared Carolyn's email in the chat. I also am going to include the website to our pre-health program. So if you have questions about the advising system, classwork, coursework, all that good stuff that we've talked about today, that's going to be a great resource for you to build off of further.